Thanks everyone for joining our webinar, The Head, Heart, and Hands of Your Destination Story. And as much as we like to dance and party, we need to get to the main topic of the day, right? We are here today to delve into the art of authentic storytelling, especially in challenging times that we all live in. We have climate change happening, we have societal inequality, and many other crises. So how do we tell the stories in these challenging times? And as people working in destination management organizations, in convention bureau, or in tourism in general, we know that the stories we tell, they actually have power. They do not only form perceptions, but actually they can also inspire actions. So it's really important to know the stories that we tell. And the days where telling story about a beautiful side of your destination is not enough anymore. Our visitors want the deeper connection. They want to hear the stories that truly resonate with their authentic self. And so today we're here to learn how to create those stories and also how to use your GDS-Index data to nurture those stories based on data and to show measurable progress towards your sustainability efforts. And to help me with this gigantic challenge, I invited some wonderful guest speakers today. We have Guy Bigwood. I'm sure all of you, if not all of you, most of you know Guy. Guy is the founder, CEO, the chief change maker of the GDS movement. So Guy is going to tell us the story of the GDS movement. We always encourage destinations to tell their stories, but then we also wanted to share our own story of where we started, where we are, and where we're heading to. We then have Jess Henson, our marketing and communications wizard, not manager, but a wizard. She's going to tell you more about the GDS-Index data, how we can better leverage on our GDS-Index participation, what are some useful tips and some useful ideas and some quick wins around communicating your GDS-Index participation. And then finally, we have Betsy Reed. Betsy, I'm truly excited to share that Betsy is here today. She is leadership advisor, sustainable systems strategist. Betsy has changed laws, has changed systems. She's giving a lot of training to leaders around the world on storytelling and how to have a greater impact. And I'm also really excited to say that Betsy is the lead storyteller for the GDS Academy, and she's going to lead on our storytelling masterclass. And I believe Betsy will tell us more about this exciting news in the end of the session, so make sure to stay tuned for that. And with that, let's go into the agenda. So you already, by now, I guess you have some idea of what we're going to go through today. We will start with the GDS movement, the evolution of our own story, and what are the latest EU regulations have to do in the overall story and how it might impact you as a destination as well. We will then jump into storytelling in a time of climate change, how to tell the truth and inspire. Betsy will speak a lot about authenticity and transparency in the authentic storytelling. And finally, Jess will share about communicating your GDS-Index participation and how you can do better on that. Some basic housekeeping rules before we go to the juicy part. You've probably seen the small pop-up at the top of your screen that the session is being recorded. Please stay muted except during the Q&A, where you can be as loud as you want. We want you to be bold. We want you to speak up. And but if speaking is not your preferred way of expressing yourself, you can always use the chat box where you can write down your questions. We have a dedicated Q&A session, but feel free to just write down your questions whenever they come to you, right? So before we get to Guy's presentation, I would like to ask our tech wizard, Julia, to please open the first poll. We'll have a few polls along the way, so let's get started with the first one. Great. Thank you, Julia. I believe you all see the poll on your screen. I will read out the questions, and I would kindly ask you to answer both questions. So first of all, we'd like to know if you are greenwashing. And the options are yes, no, we're scared of greenwashing, or I don't know what it means, what greenwashing means. So in case you don't know, I won't explain that for now. Just feel free to give to choose the option that best describes you. And then the second question is, are you guilty of greenwashing in the past? Yes, no, not sure. Please be transparent. The polls are completely anonymous. Just give your answer. We are just curious to see some answers from the room. Julia, would you please give them 2 minutes? Great. So
we still have 1 minute.
So you still have 1 minute. Great. I seem to answer the question. So whenever the minute is gone, Julia, please share the results so that we can see what are some of the responses. And we will also share the results of the poll after the webinar together with the presentation so that you can also see the data points. I believe we can now close the poll and share the results. Great. Okay, wonderful. So what do we have? We have crew that believes that they are not greenwashing, but there's also a fair amount of people that don't know what greenwashing is. So I guess it's a good moment to explain. So greenwashing is the act of an organization, a DMO, a company, of downplaying the communication about your sustainability efforts. So you are, instead of greenwashing, which is the other extreme of the spectrum, you're not speaking about the sustainability efforts that you do. And majority of our audience today believes that they're not guilty of greenwashing in the past, but there are also a lot that they're not sure about. So why don't we get started, Guy, with your presentation, and perhaps it's a good introduction for knowing what's happening right in the world. I'll give you the control in a second so you can. Great.
Great.
So you can
Thank
start
you very much.
Good
morning, good afternoon from wherever you are. There's a few faces I don't know, and it's always nice for us all to know each other. So I invite you to click on the 3 dots at the top of your screen, and when it on the top of your image, should I say, and you'll see an option there when you click on those 3 dots to rename, and you can add to your organization after your name, and that would be wonderful. So we're going to see where you're from, and maybe that help stimulate some thoughts about what your destination is doing. So I thought I'd start with a story, because some of you maybe not heard of this, and some of you have heard about 50 times, James, probably. So once upon a time, I hope you're sitting very comfortable. I'd like to tell you a story. So once upon a time, 2010, we were in Gothenburg. And I was working for the city of Gothenburg, and I was working for the city of Copenhagen. And we got the 2 guys together to brainstorm. We've both been real pioneers, or they've both been real pioneers in developing destination sustainability strategies. And they said, this is really cool what we're doing, what we're working on. There's not many people doing this stuff. We should get out and share it. So we had this idea to bring together 15 cities across Scandinavia. I'm not sure if anyone in this crowd was there. Ingham, maybe you were there. And out of that workshop, there came a vision to create, how could we create a sustainable Scandinavian meetings region? That was what was written on one of these pieces of paper. And that was, wow, fantastic. Everyone was really hyped up and excited. And then a voice of probably a very practical person at the back of the room went, that's nice, but how do we know when we're there? How do we know when we're there? So, oh, good. So I was like, we need some type of system to compare performance, to work out what is a good mark for sustainability. Where are we? How do we get there? How do we get beyond? So in 2012, we launched the Scandinavian Sustainable Destinations Index. If you think that was 2012, 2016, we launched the global one. And now today we have 100+ destinations all around the world working, sharing on sustainability and regeneration together. Many of you are part of that journey. I thank you for being part of the movement and for all the great work that you're doing. And this movement is about moving, right? It's about shaking and working out how do we do that? How do we share and collaborate and get better together? But the market is changing. the market is moving. So I thought I'd do something to give you an update of one really key thing that will affect you wherever you are. I see quite a few of you in Europe, but some of you are in Shelby. I see you from DC. I see the Ottawa team, some other people from around the world. There's new legislation coming out of the EU, which affects us all. It doesn't matter where you're at. And I think will totally change the market. If you can think of what GDPR was for data protection, this is what's happening on sustainability. Why has that happened? Right. I think the stats from the EU, they went out and surveyed thousands of people and found that 50% of the green claims that they analysed were vague, misleading, unfounded, and 40% were just not unsubstantiated. Right? And you've seen these claims. You're like, we have eco-friendly practices. What the hell does that mean? Or, you know, our agency is 100% sustainable. We offset our emissions. You know, you do one thing and you say that makes the whole of your business sustainable. Or, you know, you may have seen this, we're the most sustainable destination in the world, or the most sustainable hotel. Or all of our hotels are certified with our own eco label. You know, like it's themselves just valuing that. Or you see some things, you know, if you get a bit nerdy, it's like, oh, fridges are CFC free. You know, CFCs were banned 30 years ago. Of course your fridges are CFC free. One of the things I love is like, our cruise ships are zero waste. Great, there's zero waste, but they're spewing all that sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere at the same time. So the EU said, you know, we need to kind of shape this up in Europe. We have a really big agenda for green development, the new Green Deal, and they saw that when someone greenwashes, it doesn't just affect that company; it affects everyone around that organization, and even the competitors of that reason. It knocks consumer trust. And so if we're trying to get consumers to choose green hotels and eco-certified hotels, or work with agencies that have proper social and environmental sustainability processes, we need consumer trust. So this legislation and is a path of legislation, and I'll call it the green claims, but I'm kind of referring to a few different things here. The direction is, how can we set forward minimum requirements for substantiating, communicating, and verifying environmental claims with the objective of fortifying consumer trust? So what does this mean? It means there needs to be clear criteria on how companies should prove environmental claims and labels. Right? So if I'm a car company and I'm Tesla and I say my car is the most sustainable in the world, what's the data that backs that up? Right? What's the story that backs that up? Secondly, for claims like that, there needs to be someone who comes in and verifies those. So there needs to be kind of criteria and requirements for the people that check those claims, for the verifiers. And then there needs to just, you know, then they need to be controlled, the people that do that, not just those brands. So let's dig a little deeper what that means. So it means that the EU is going to be looking at the current environmental labeling schemes. Today, there's 200 and something for tourism alone. Okay, so the EU is saying we can't have any more. There's just too many in the market, right? We need to improve what we've got and only allow anything new into the market if it fills a gap where there's nothing at the moment. So there's a kind of shake up. So if you're from a certification company, there's waves going on at the moment. And I believe there's going to be consolidation and a change in the certification market. That's another conversation. The EU is pushing their own kind of certifications. And they're also kind of really trying to step up how verifiers hire people and the kind of people they have. And those certifiers have to, or will have to, go through an accreditation process. So this is changing, right? Why is this interesting? Because this affects any business anywhere in the world that is targeting European citizens. So if you're in Washington, you're in Sydney, you're in Victoria, you're in Hamburg, this affects you if you're a business. Okay, this is focused on businesses. It's not a B2B, it's a B2C focused campaign. This law is not 100% ratified yet. It is at the last stage of ratification, and I believe there's some negotiation still to happen in the next month or two. So we may see like micro enterprises probably like, less than 5 people that might be exempt. What is interesting at the moment is it doesn't cover public organizations. Many of you from DMOs, many of you are public DMOs, i.e. you're part of a city. In theory, it does not affect you. If you're a private DMO or a public-private and you're actually a company as a DMO, it affects you. So a little bit of gray area around that. What I am sure about is that this legislation is and will affect other legislations happening in this space all around the world. It's already affecting the Canadian legislation, the Australian one, and some other things, the UK one. So, and I am sure that the DMOs who are not required to change their communication because they're public, and other public institutions, I'm not just talking about tourism and DMOs, will have to up their game. And I think they're probably more policy at a governmental level that will come out as well in the next few years. So interesting times. But there's more, because there's kind of 3 key parts of this, 3 key laws. We call them directives because in the EU issues a directive, and then the 28 member states then have to implement them locally. So it's a directive for each of those 28 countries to implement into law. So there's 3 laws. Number 1 is Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. And that basically says you're not allowed to mislead clients. Okay, that law was ratified in March 2024. It's already out there, already being used. People are being caught up with that at the moment. So we all have to be more careful. Second thing, empowering consumers for the Green Transition Directive. Don't they love short sentences and easy to understand words? So this is the one that's already really very focused on environmental claims and misleading commercial practices. And this is already saying that you can't have certified sustainability labels like hotels, many of the hotels have. You can't have generic claims, and you can't have, you can't basically say that we are 100% sustainable event because we've offset our emissions. So there's a lot of focus around carbon emission programs. And this is valid from September 2026. So we are having to shake up already, some of us. And then the big one, which affects, as I said, all businesses, is the Green Claims Directive that gets much more specific, okay, and is much more specific on the certification and verification side of things. And that we're waiting for the dates. It could, I reckon, it'd be beginning of 2027 for that date, but we'll see that in the next few months. So those are the 3 key things you need to know about. What you do need to know about is the risk is real. There's many different cases already. There's 3 key ones. I'll pick on one of them, I think. KLM. KLM is a leader in sustainability. I think there's an airline. They're doing some really amazing work, really trying to pioneer this. And they came out with the whole campaign, Fly Responsibly. Right? Brilliant stuff. They're trying to use this to motivate their employees, their clients to think about this. One of their big claims is, their work is about flying responsibility because they use sustainable aviation fuel. Trouble is, they use 0.5% of sustainable aviation fuel in their whole portfolio. And so the court in Holland said, 0.5%, that's not material. That's nothing, right? I'm sorry, you're painting the picture that's rosy. It's not the reality. So they took them to court and won the court case. Booking.com, you might have seen, that they were kind of caught up at the same time in this piece of action. They're based in the Holland as well, and they were ahead of the game. They were threatened, and before they could be taken to court, they took down their whole hotel sustainability program, which was focused on their own criteria, their own verification process. So now they only report hotels that are certified with an internationally recognized certification. There's other ones out there, right? So this is real. So what should you be doing if you're a destination? And probably any organization, actually. 1, educate yourselves. Make sure you know about this. We have a white paper coming out very soon about this. We've written it, just doing the design work. So read about this. Find out how it works for you. 2, support your businesses to develop new storytelling skills. we're going to have to work out how to storytell in this new kind of age of legislation. It's a bit complicated. So think about how you're going to tell your own story. That kind of means that number 3, you need to get an audit and work out how well you're telling. If you take the rules from this and kind of assess yourself, how well are you doing? And then third, if you are a destination, how are you supporting those businesses towards certification? Because this is really going to drive certification. So how what's your strategy to support businesses? And if you're just an individual organizer or an DMO, are you going to take your own certification program? What does this mean for the GDS movement? I guess, first of all, we're doing certification ourselves. We're using the Biosphere certification system, and we're in the journey, a longer term journey to get B Corp. So that's our own kind of walk and talk. But it does mean the GDS-Index, who many of you use, will have to change. So here's a good example. So when you look at certification programs, there needs to be 2 sides. So there needs to be a standard side of how you create the standard, and then how you verify against the standard, 2 sides. We're in a weird space in that we're not a certification. We don't claim to be a certification, and we're kind of being pushed down the bucket or kind of pushed into a bucket of certification. So we're fighting that, and we hope we can stay as a non-certification for the index. But it does mean the GDS index as a criteria has to evolve. So we have already last year started to implement a process of redesigning the criteria to align with the ISEAL code of good practice. We hired Claudia, I'm not sure if Claudia is on the call, from GSTC, who is our guru at criteria and standards and certification development, and she leads that process. She did that for GSTC, now she leads it for us. And so if you've been part of this process, or if you've been part of the GDS index this year, you've noticed it's harder this year than it was last year. We're much tougher in the assessment. We're asking for more data. The criteria is more finite and more articulate. That's because we're following this process. We will probably certify the GDS index standard using an ISO. But there's a couple of different approaches, so we're just working that out. Looking to the future, where we're going. So the GDS index, we are hoping it will not have to go through this process. It will stay as an index. And our hope is maybe even to streamline it, to make it a little bit simpler, to make it more approachable for other destinations. But what we have decided to do, and this is after a lot of consultation over the years, is to make a certification of the GDS index. So it won't be called GDS Index certification. It will be called, I don't know, GDS Index certified or something like that. And it will be an on-site and online verification process. So a third party, because we're not allowed to do that in the new world, will come on site to value and assess how well you've implemented that. Okay, so we're now talking to different third parties who are bidding, and we're in discussions to do this process. That process will probably also have an option to align with GSTC criteria as well. So the actual dynamics or the details of how this all works is in development. We are going to do this with our technical advisory committee. And see, Shelby is on the call. She's part of that, and maybe someone else I can't see on my screen. So, that's the journey. This is going to happen. There'll be lots of opportunities for consultation and input into this process too. So let's give you an idea of what the GDS index is going to do. And I guess what else does this mean for the GDS movement? How does our story change, right? So it means, as I said, we've had to recruit people, and we're delighted to recruit people with more extensive standards development and implementation experience. We have people in the team from Green Key and people. You're about to see a white paper coming out about the new EU legislation and what that means for you. So that's coming out soon. We're strengthening our partnerships with all the certification bodies, so we all work together. We're doing our own certification. But it also means that we have to adapt some of our kind of products and services. So some of you, I think, have been on the storytelling masterclass, where we've got a new leader. You're about to hear from Betsy, who will lead that program. We're integrating much more around compliance level and risk management around the e-compliance into that, as well as how do you just get better at telling stories. And then we are kind of upgrading our team and adding more resources into the comms team around how we help you develop your messaging. So exciting times, really. So a lot happening there, and pretty cool that this is happening. I think it's good. In some ways, many of us have been asking for legislation for a long time. The legislation is coming. It always makes you feel a bit uncomfortable when it does happen. But I think the market and our consumers and us as individuals deserve that. So my computer screen has frozen. So I'm going to stop there. Invite anyone to throw up a question in the chat box. Welcome, Gwendol. Nice to see you coming to join us as well. Thank you, mate. And you missed me talking about my latest cycle adventure, Gwendol, so I have to tell you about that later.
Thank you, Guy. Really interesting presentation. I think it's the first time we're publicly speaking about how all the new regulation, the new EU legislation might also affect our own journey. And I believe this piece is also really useful for our audience. We do have a question in the chat, but
great question, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I need another half an hour to talk about all the ESG legislation happening just in Europe, let alone around the world. And I'm not sure where you're from, Penguin City. Maybe you can let me know where you're from. So I'm sorry, I don't know that place. But I mean, there's a lot happening in Canada, Australia, around the world. So Green Claims Directive is about how you communicate with consumers. Most of the ESG legislation coming out is around how you declare your results, just like you would do with your financial reporting. So it's often more focused on investors, on your shareholders and other stakeholders. So they're separate, but they should align, obviously, but they're separate. So you're going to have requirements for GCD, because if you communicate to consumers, but you may have a business who just does B2B. So maybe an event company, you could say, only communicates to other businesses, so it doesn't have a GCD requirement, but it would have in many countries an ESG reporting requirement. So quite complicated. There's different scenarios. I think that's the next session we should do.
Thank you, Guy. And we have the dedicated Q&A session. So if there are more questions, please feel free to pop those, and we will address them at the session.
That's
Julia?
James. I get who it is now. It's James who asked that question. So I can explain that to you on Friday, James.
We hope to get a bit of that explanation too after your encounter on Friday. And for now, Julia, why don't you start the second poll? And we have some more questions to you. So the question, I would read it out loud. When it comes to your sustainability performance, what do you communicate on? The sustainability progress or performance by topic, let's say climate action, DEI, or whatever that topic is. The sustainability strategy, the GDS-Index score, ranking participation, none of those, or something else that we might not know about. You have around 1 minute to answer this question. We would like to see as many answers as possible. And later I will also share some data about from the GDS-Index 2024 about communicating your sustainability efforts on the website. It's still very surprising that not a lot of destinations are doing that. How are we doing on the poll, Julia? Do we have a couple of more seconds to go?
Yes, a couple more. I think we're almost there. And I think we can move forward and end the poll and see the results.
Great. I'm curious to see the results. Great. So majority are actually communicating the progress by topic. I would also be curious to know which is the topic then that you're communicating on. A lot of the audience are communicating on the GDS index score, the participation, and the third is the sustainability strategy. And there are still people who are not communicating at all. And hopefully after today's session, that picture will change. And with that, I'd like to invite Betsy to tell us more about storytelling in a time of climate change and the importance of transparency and authenticity. Betsy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bella. So you might
And-
notice, can you hear me? All good. Okay. That's like, see. You might notice I've italicized the key word in the title, which is how to tell the truth and inspire. We'll sort of dive into this because, I mean, if you're on this webinar, you no doubt are interested in storytelling. You're probably skilled at storytelling or want to be more skilled at storytelling. And we all know that climate change is a big issue, social inequality is a big issue, and people know about it. So your audiences want to hear the truth. So how do you tell stories that give people the truth, that are authentic and transparent, while also inspiring people? Because if you've been in other GDS masterclasses or the certification, we talk about, are you in denial? Are you in acceptance? Or are you completely on the floor about these issues? Because they can be quite heavy. So storytelling is a skill to be able to connect with the emotions of your audience and inspire them to do something good, to do something that you want them to do, to visit your destination, to take an action, to have a positive impact. So I've decided to go quite macro because Jess is going to take you into the more specific, more micro stuff around the GDS index. But I want you to make sure you've got a pen and paper or you're typing throughout this and really try to think how you can apply what I'm going to talk about to you. Because what I've done is I'm calling it the authenticity filter, because authenticity is absolutely key to telling stories well around these issues we're going to talk about. So this is our agenda. During this very quick clip through, it's just to make clear why storytelling is a key part of regeneration. And we talk about regeneration versus sustainability all the time at GDS-Movement because it's about giving back. It's not just about minimizing negative impacts. So let's talk about the risks of maybe doing it badly, of greenwashing, of saying nothing out of fear of getting it wrong, and then the opportunities around doing it well. So my mission here is to really help you get more comfortable with these things so that you have the courage, but also the skills to actually tell the good stories that you can tell. And then I'll share a clear, simple filter to sense check your storytelling around sustainability and regeneration. Just a bit more about me, why the heck I'm giving this presentation. As Bella already said in my introduction, I am the new lead storyteller at GDS-Academy. So I'm leading the masterclass on storytelling. So if anybody's interested in going deeper on that, on what we're about to go into, that's a good way to do it. We can come to you. You can come to us in Spain or some other destination if somebody wants to sponsor us as a destination to really dive deeper into these things and come up with some tangible stories for yourself. But everything I've done in my career has involved storytelling, which is why I'm here today. So you'll see that red book cover on that side of the screen there. I think it's left unless it's flipped, called Communicating Social and Environmental Issues Effectively. It came out in 2020, which seems a lifetime ago now, doesn't it? But when it came out, it was because I'd sort of staged a challenge, a coup to the communications and PR sector in which I've been working, and then was invited to write a book about the trainings I've been doing. Because basically I saw that a lot of the problems were that greenwashing, purpose washing, saying things that weren't verifiable were rarely done out of malice or intention, but mainly out of lack of skill. And so I started doing trainings for the world's biggest PR association, the PRCA, which is based in the UK. And then they asked me to write this book about it. So it's just a framework for how to do this as well as possible. But some other roles I've had are very related. I was the head of campaigns for Zero Waste Scotland and developed the national recycling campaign there, ran the national food waste campaign, which made me an expert in behavior change communications. I've won some awards for that. It's something I enjoy doing, but it's really down to artful storytelling, often using data to be really strong in your points, very convincing. I was the initial CEO and I set up the Scottish Fair Trade Forum, so the National Fair Trade Organization in Scotland, which worked with all sectors to tell the story of the impact of how you buy things on communities in developing countries in particular. So a lot of storytelling there. And then I have a couple of interesting ones here. One is Grayling. It's one of the world's biggest integrated communications associations, and I was a director of sustainability there and worked with a lot of managing directors and CEOs of brand names you would recognize who would come to us and say, we need to comms this. And it was a real opportunity as a communicator to say, well, we can't communicate this without creating risk unless you're actually doing it. So we had a lot of strategy conversations because I'm a sneaky management consultant, basically, because communications is so strategic on these issues. And then Nestle headhunted me. That was an interesting hop over the fence to a company that a lot of people I'd worked with previously would not approve of. But I headed up their public affairs engagement on sustainability in the UK, which was, well, still is their most activist market. And they brought me in to sort of keep them safe. But it was a real opportunity to mine for a lot of the good stories of the world's biggest food company who are doing quite a lot of good things while also being big enough that they're also always getting something somewhere, I assure you, but they're doing their best on other fronts. So it was a really interesting experience in a really large company. And then until recently, I was a professor of leadership at a university in Barcelona, teaching final year students about how to be leaders. And a big part of that, we did whole modules on storytelling because it is a leadership capability in this day and age. You need to be able to bring people with you and inspire them. And I am currently, and have been for 3 years, the head tutor of a course for the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. And the course is called Communicating for Influence and Impact. So I work with senior leaders from around the world, 4 different presentations a year. And a lot of what we focus on is storytelling, how they communicate what they want to achieve in the world, their mission, and things around sustainability and regeneration. So I say that to sort of also convince you really should sign up for the storytelling masterclass, but also storytelling is so important in every sector, in every country. So it's all relevant. But we're having a trust crisis. It probably hasn't escaped your notice that people don't necessarily know what information to trust. You might find it a struggle to trust sources of information, and you might be dealing with audiences who themselves struggle to know what to believe. So when we're communicating about things like climate change, etc., it's key. Thank you for switching slides, Bella. Here I go. So there are some very reputable things out there. And if you need to prove this point to someone who needs to sign off your budget or give you time to do more storytelling and dig deeper, any of these big organizations, Ipsos, Edelman, EY, McKinsey, have loads and loads and loads of proof points for you on this. So I've just provided a few. 59% of people globally believe that their societal leaders, that means governments, business, NGOs, and media, every sector, are purposefully trying to mislead them by spreading misinformation. If you don't already know the Edelman Trust Barometer, it's a really useful annual report that comes out from a huge global comms agency called Edelman, and they've been tracking trust for the past 20-something years. And it's just a really interesting read because they've tracked a steady decline in trust. So your role as a communicator, as a marketeer, as someone who's going to tell stories is absolutely crucial because people are looking to trust, but they are not finding things to trust. So you have an opportunity. And then these next 2 points are from an Ipsos survey from 2022, fairly recent, but they're just talking about trust in media. Communicators is at an all-time low. Only 37% of people globally trust journalists and media outlets to provide accurate and unbiased information on sustainability and regeneration issues. So the field is wide open. People are skeptical, but if you can provide reasons to be believable, people will believe you. And then only 25% of people believe that companies are honest in their communications about their sustainability efforts, reflecting widespread criticism, skepticism of corporate messaging. So this shows up in things like the EU Green Claims Directive. So policymakers are paying attention, the public, your audiences are paying attention, and here we are in the middle, needing to tell stories that inspire while also telling the truth. So what do we do about it? Well, the risk is real, as is the opportunity. These are 2 headlines from Newsweek, a publication you've no doubt heard of, the same day in August, not even a month ago. And one talks about the Paris Olympic Committee deserving gold for climate leadership, and the other says the Paris Olympic sustainability efforts missed the mark. Who do you believe? So very few readers will probably scroll all the way to the end of the article to see who wrote it. The first was written by someone who works for a climate NGO, very reputable expert. The second was written by someone who works for an organization that has an agenda about climate change not being a thing. But they both look like legitimate headlines in a legitimate publication. And who do you believe? So if you look at these articles, if you read them in depth, one has a lot of proof points. It talks about the strategic approach, the proof, the measurability. The other is just an opinion piece. So again, we'll get into this, and we get into this more in the masterclass when we talk about storytelling principles. We do that, but hopefully you can remember this as we go through a filter. What can we do about this? First of all, it's really important to remember one word: authenticity. What is authenticity? It's the quality of being genuine, real, and true to your own values, beliefs, and identity. That's your brand values, beliefs, and identity, but also your own. So don't forget to bring your personal values and beliefs to your work. It can be a very powerful asset. It's about being honest and transparent. Transparency is a key part of this, and acting in alignment with your organization's values. It's a key component in building trust because it reflects consistency between words, intentions, and actions. So, if your higher ups have a strategy, or if your organization has a strategy that it's going to do things on sustainability, on regeneration, it's about making sure you're aligned with that and demonstrating why you're aligned with that. And then this is also a key one, just a refresher. It's a fundamental, but we use this definition in our stuff at GDS all the time. But this is the Brundtland definition of sustainability. It's existed since 1987 from a UN Brundtland Commission, and it's about sustainable development, which is what we used to call this stuff. It's development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And the reason I bring this up is because it's really important to remember when we use the word sustainability, regeneration, etc., it's not just about the environment. It's also about diversity and inclusion, social equality, all of these things, and also about economic impact. So if it's not three things: economically viable, socially sustainable, environmentally sustainable, it's not sustainable. So remember that when you're doing your work, because as sustainability has emerged as an industry, it's tended to end up as a niche, meaning environmental stuff. So you might have separate teams internally working on different issues like diversity and inclusion over here and environmental sustainability over there, but you need to find ways to bring together the stories and the work as much as possible. And that will help you in doing more authentic, transparent storytelling that makes sense. So here's the authenticity filter. We'll clip through it quickly because time is short. Basically, transparency. Like I said, why is what you're saying transparent? Give people proof points so that they can believe, okay, you say this and there's the proof. Is this communication consistent with your strategy, with your brand, with your values? And then how? Give it to them. Make it easy for them to understand that. Does it involve your audience if relevant? So not only does it hit the heart and use the language that they need you to use, but also could you involve them in some way in informing your story, in shaping your story, and even co-creating it, because they've got skin in the game. Is the narrative relatable? And why? Why would your audience care about this? How do they feel like it's relevant to them? And then is it believable? In other words, do you have proof points? Do you have data? Are you explaining it in a way that doesn't feel like you're trying to confuse people and just kind of hide and not admit everything? So how do you do transparency? You can see these, I won't read all of them, but it's just about being open, sharing verifiable facts, and being willing to admit mistakes. You don't have to be perfect to be believable and to be reputable. It's not necessarily risky to admit when you're not getting things right, but sometimes it can be risky to not admit when you're getting things wrong. So think about this as if you are the person being told the story that you want to tell, and think, okay, why would I believe this? Is this transparent? So we'll move on through the filter. What does consistency look like? This is kind of a no-brainer, but just a few bullet points to make it very clear. Does everything align? Your words, your intentions, your actions? Are you aligned with your values and brand? Are you reinforcing other key messages? So quite often you see sustainability or regeneration stories or reports, and they're kind of over here. One team puts out the sustainability report. but it's not reflected in marketing. It's not reflected in how you offer services or products. And it looks weird because it's obviously not integrated and therefore looks like it might just be made up. And then show commitment to the cause. Basically show how you're building a track record over time. You've gotten this stuff right. You've made improvement against these metrics. Maybe you haven't done as well on certain things as you hoped to, but show your track record because that also strengthens trust. How can you involve your audience? So hopefully this gives you some good ideas. You might have some better ones already. First of all, obviously, who is your audience? And when you're playing with new things, like with this filter, get as specific as possible. Maybe just focus on one tiny little segment. How can you genuinely listen to their concerns, respond to their feedback, and show how their input shapes your outcomes? Basically, how do they help you shape your story? How is it really for them? Are there things you could consult them on so they're bought into the story? And then, yeah, remember you can use the chat. Exactly. So if you do have questions or thoughts as we go, please do drop them in the chat. And then relatable. So one of the issues I have with communicators on sustainability and regeneration is often they forget that it needs to be relatable. People get tied up in the terminology or the need to report on certain things, which is very valid. It's required in a lot of cases, but make it relatable, make it exciting, make it a story. How can you tell stories that resonate on a personal level? And how can you show the real world impact? How can you break it down? Be creative and maybe even ask people who aren't so directly involved in the story because they might have some useful outside perspective. Are you using language that really means something? Are you using unnecessary jargon? So I use what I call the grandmother filter and the 10-year-old filter, two of them. Would my grandma understand this story? It's a really simple one to ask yourself because if your grandma can understand it, you're doing okay. And then most mainstream newspapers are written for a 10-year-old reading level. This is just something journalists will tell you. So if you can write something that would be understood by a 10-year-old, you're also doing well. You're also going to get your story out there more easily. For example, media will cover it because they don't have to rewrite it because you're writing it for their audience. So these are two good ones to keep in mind, the grandma filter and the 10-year-old filter, because it will help you out. It will get you where you need to go. And then believability. This comes down to how do you build trust? You have to be believable. You can tell a beautiful story, but if people don't believe you, it can actually really backfire. So why? Why would your audience believe you? What are your proof points? Where's the budget? So I got this from a journalist I work with a lot. His name is James Murray, and he's the editor-in-chief of Business Green, which is a really leading green business source of news. And he always asks, okay, where's the budget? Are you spending more on the communications than on the actual work? So look at where the budget is. Explain what you've put resources toward to show that you're actually doing the work you're saying you're going to do. And what's the people power behind that? What's the team, etc. And if there isn't much, consider this as a risk because it might also allow you to have a strategic conversation about putting more resource into the work you're claiming to be doing. And then what data do you have to back up your message? Can you verify it? Can anyone else verify it? So that's where things like the GDS-Index come in handy, or influencers or people who have visited, if you're a destination, who can talk about how inspired they were by what you're doing locally. And then that's it. Well, that's it. That was sort of a through your authenticity filter, but just as a recap, to run through, is your communication transparent? Because transparency builds trust. Why would people believe you? Is it consistent? How are you showing consistency? Does it involve your audience if possible? How? Is the narrative relatable? Why? Is the narrative believable? Why? This is a fun filter to use in team meetings and even having sort of a few people play devil's advocate. So you run through the story you want to tell and they just ask those questions. Okay, why? How? How? So really enjoy it as a game, but it helps you to just have a really rigorous filter to run things through. It's not rocket science and it's not complicated, but it can often get missed out in the busyness of just getting your job done sometimes. So what does this look like in practice? Just a quick example, because I wanted to share something from outside tourism and events and destination marketing. IKEA. We all know and love IKEA, right? Well, maybe we don't love them, but we all know IKEA, right? So they have a buyback scheme where you can take any piece of IKEA furniture to almost every IKEA store and they will give you store credit to take it back. And this serves their stated agenda, their strategy around creating more circular economy approaches. So they'll take back your furniture rather than you putting it on the curb or having to deal with it or it going potentially to landfill. They'll take it back and they will repurpose it. They'll turn it back into new furniture. They, crush some of the board and turn it into new board, etc. They're very transparent about what they do with furniture, which is key. So you're not just left wondering, are they actually just putting this in an incinerator somewhere or throwing it into landfill? They've engaged people very well with it. They advertise in their stores. They run advertising around this. And it's been shaped around what they know their audiences actually need and want. It's a pain point for people. What do you do with that old bookcase you've had forever? Well, IKEA will take it back. How cool is that? So why this works is because it's transparent. They've made it very known that they have not gotten everything well, they haven't done it properly all the time, but they're still always on a journey to create a more circular economy. It's consistent. They've been doing this for years. It involves their audience. Obviously, it offers a service they need. And then it's relatable because who doesn't have or hasn't had IKEA furniture at some point? And it's, even this picture, it's cute. It's a little boat with an IKEA table in the middle. Is it believable? Yes, because they have photos. They report on it every year. So they've done a good job of actually using that authenticity filter to build trust. People love IKEA as a brand, even if they do sell cheap furniture that maybe you don't always need, but it's a great example of how transparent, authentic, consistent storytelling on regeneration and sustainability has gone very well for a brand. And it kind of gives you that feel good factor, right? You go to IKEA and buy stuff thinking, I can bring back my old stuff. So it kind of serves as an incentive to meet their agenda of selling more things and making money as a business. So not overly complicated. I'm realizing time is flying, right? Time flies when you're having fun, but we would love to hear questions and comments on how you might apply this. So Bella, over to you.
Thank you, Betsy. Yes, time flies. Unfortunately, I would have loved to continue listening to you for another 2 hours at least, but we have the agenda for today. So please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I myself have a few of those, but I'd like to open the floor for anyone from the audience who would like to use a chance and ask a question to Betsy. Remember, you can either raise your hand or write down the question in the chat. And while we're waiting, actually, I will go ahead and I will ask my question. And the rest of you can think about that. So I was thinking, Betsy, we always say in marketing that if you want to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to no one. And so when it comes to the sustainability story, what do you think? Is there one story to tell to everyone since it's the true story, or what's your take on it actually?
I'm actually going to steal from something Guy said yesterday in yesterday's same webinar that we did. Well, some people are totally turned off by the words sustainability and regeneration, right? But some people are drawn to it. So I would say yes and no. Have the same overarching macro story that then you can adapt the language to, the approach to for your audience. Because the main thing is you want to inspire them to do something that has a positive impact, right? That really gives back. So give it to them, serve it to them on a platter in whatever way they need to hear it. So know what your story is that's aligned with your values, but then be able to adapt it. I think that makes sense to everybody who's ever done marketing and storytelling, right?
Definitely. Thank you, Betsy. Do we have other questions? And I will just stop sharing for a moment to see the faces on the screen. If not, we have another 5 minutes for Q&A after Jessica's presentation. Well, all right, thank you.
Got a question. So maybe we could use that from Penguin City again.
James.
Great. So we have a question from James. There's a lot of talk about impact measurement. Are you aware of any sustainability impact or social impact calculators for business events that can be weaved into a story? What value a live site where the source code is an event versus economic impact offset against the carbon footprint of an event hosted in your city? Betsy,
Guy, yeah, I was about to say,
Guy?
Guy, I know of a few, but Guy knows a lot more than I do.
Yeah, James, in terms dedicated impacts calculators that focus on the events industry and how we compare those. No, that doesn't exist today, as far as I've known. There are various impact calculators, but most of those aren't very useful. We've gone and analysed most of the top ones. There's a project to develop one, which we're involved in at the moment. So watch this space. It's important. Methodologies, as you know, working with our colleagues at Meet for Impact, we have a very specific methodology for measuring the impact of events, and we've adapted that in I think next week. I'm not sure if you're actually going to be at the event, but we'll launch the Visit Britain Impact Framework a few weeks after that. The Irish launch of their impact framework. Sydney's using one that we helped to develop. Montreal, I'm not sure if Fanny's in the audience today, has got a similar one. So there's things there, but it's kind of the next step. I wonder if it's going to be a bit like the carbon footprinted world, where every week someone comes out with a new calculator at the moment, but none of them actually measure carbon in the same way. So maybe there's a bit of work for us to do to come up with a process and methodology to make sure we're measuring impact in the same way for events. Yeah, good one. Something to think about. Janelle is just, yeah, good. Thank you. Janelle's teaching in Vancouver Island University, but a great university. Someone else from Vancouver, Gwendol. Yeah. In our industry, it tends to be a glass half full side of things. How much time might we coach our colleagues to temper that enthusiasm with a little more realism? That's a good one for you, Betsy.
I was about to say, can I
Yeah.
take this one? Well, it's exactly the same as communications, mainstream communications people who do all the briefs. But if you talk the language of reputation and risk management and their strategic role in being the guardians of reputation and risk, I find you can position it as a very inspiring role to be in, while also helping people to understand that not being careful or fully understanding what they're communicating when it comes to complexity around things like carbon or climate impact or social impact can be a really useful way to get people involved in that, in like making the most of their real strength as enthusiastic, optimistic people who love their jobs, but also see that they really need to be careful and knowledgeable and wise. I like the word wise. Be wise in their storytelling.
Going to be really, what's the word? I'm going to disrupted by a thought here. I'm not sure that all the greenwashing that's gone on is bad. I think greenwashing has played its role. And let me explain what that means. Is that enthusiasm, that glass half full process has got people talking about stuff that's made them got them caught out. Okay. And that process of getting them caught out has made them have to go back and get the shit done properly. And I think that process has been more powerful than sometimes when people have tried to do it correctly. So it's I'm not sure, you may not agree with me, but I'm just going to throw that out and take this corner here that because I kind of I'm a bit concerned at the moment that with the EU legislation, we're going to see more green hushing. People get more worried about this and a bit scared. And there's all these bloody new campaigns and things that we have to follow, the ESG regulations, stuff like that. And so I think even more important that we upskill our teams and professionalize our teams with sustainability skills so they tell messages correctly, because otherwise we're not going to be accelerating action when we've got to go 10 times faster.
Phil has just asked a really good question about how do you navigate storytelling where there are good projects being delivered, but if you take a more holistic lens, the impact is rather minuscule, etc. That's a great question.
Oh, that's a good one, isn't it, eh?
Yeah, that's a humdinger, as my mom would say. But it's about right sizing it. I like the term right sizing it, making it proportionate, still tell that good story and talk about how it's part of something bigger. And there are some other things that need to be done, because also you can use those stories to help motivate your own organization to keep progressing, to see that there are other things they could make links to or greater commitments they could make while also celebrating the good stuff. You know, it's sort of like when you're a kid in school and you're like, good job, you got 90%. Let's work on the 10% that you got wrong. You know, sort of celebrate with one hand and push with the other.
It's a bit like, you know, the opposite we've seen is that, you know, someone does one pilot project and it's a beautiful pilot project, but they're kind of making that sound like whole organizations following that way. That's classic greenwashing, right? And that's what you're not supposed to do. But if you tell the story right, you know, this is a pilot project, this is where we're working on, this is an innovation, and you just, it's the, what do you call it, the phrasing of it, the surrounding narrative that you bring around that. And I think that's the key thing. But you can't stop because there's, you know, innovation happens on the edges, and it's those small things that becomes the big things. And so we can't stop that.
Well, one last thing before we pass over to Jess, because I know there's a lot to go, but I've spent a lot of time as a sustainability person throwing myself in front of the marketing team before they go out and say something without sense checking it with the experts. So involve other people, you know, involve other teams so that you've got diversity and depth of perspective to be able to be very robust and accurate and inspiring. So yeah, involve other people if possible and just make it very robust.
Even such a key thing is, I just see this countless, right? You work really hard on the messaging and then it gets outsourced to the ad agency or the Marcoms team who don't have the right language and words, and they come out with something terrible. I had this yesterday with a situation. It's like, how come we trained everyone except for that one person and they've come out with this and no one checked because it was the boss, right?
And I guess that's where the data is important.
Yes.
Because you cannot create false narratives with the
Yeah.
correct data. And well, I guess Jess is going to tell us more about how to use the data to create those narratives. But just before that, we will launch our last poll for the day. So Julia, if you please. Thank you. So we have the last two questions for the day. We'd like to know, how does your organization produce its sustainability performance communications? Are you using an internal team? Are you hiring a freelancer or an agency? Maybe you do a bit of both, or perhaps you're not communicating sustainability at all. And the second question is, do you communicate your involvement in the GDS index? Yes, sometimes we plan to, or perhaps no. So just 1 minute to answer the two questions, and then we will go into the our last presentation for the day. Julia, are we getting in the responses?
We are. I will still give them 15 less seconds for late comers to vote.
I'm mistaken. You still have a chance to respond to the questions. And just a reminder that we're going to share those results later on. So are we ready to share them now, Julia?
I think we are. Let's send this poll, and there you go.
Great, thank you. Wow. Actually, the numbers are quite different from yesterday's poll. So we see that the majority are using an internal team to produce the sustainability performance communications. Yeah, most of you are communicating your involvement in the GDS-Index, which is pretty good results. I've just looked up into GDS-Index 2024 data, and actually it was interesting to see that 44% of the participating destinations do not publicly communicate about their progress on their website. So Jess, can you please help us solve that problem and encourage our destinations to communicate about their progress in a measurable manner?
Sure thing. Thank you, Bella. Will you go ahead and present and
Sure. And now you have the
hand
control.
the power to me?
The power and the
Thank
slide
you.
control are yours.
All mine. Great. So I'm really glad to be with you on this journey to regeneration. And I wanted to explore with you today communicating that index participation and using the data that is so valuable that we can help to develop the transparency and authenticity of with our vetting process. And I've dubbed it, whoopsie, sorry. Right, we've got a bit of a lag. Please bear with me. A lag on the internet and a kitty on the lap. I've dubbed it moving from data to dialogue, and the focus is crafting these evidence-based stories for your destination, bearing in mind that you may have a tiny niche segment or a broad audience. The beauty of being part of the index is that wherever you are in your journey, we can support you to be more transparent and authentic in that destination sustainability storytelling. And I want to unpack that with you today. What we're going to do is look at two approaches that any participating city or region can use to unpack the treasures. But I just want to recap the GDS-Index categories and their criteria very briefly, especially also for those who are in the audience and aren't participating destinations, so may not be entirely familiar. We have 4 main categories with 77 criteria that are aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the GSTC destination criteria, as covered earlier by Guy. They are city environmental performance, city social performance, supplier performance, a vital category, and the overarching one, destination management. Within these 4 main categories, there are various topics that we help you to measure on. And of course, within that, there are many stories that are worth telling. The first approach is about storytelling based on your participation. I think what I really liked in Betsy's presentation was especially the focus on being open about where you are in your journey and what you are doing, and maybe also what you're not doing. The beauty of using verified data to tell your story is that you may be a beginner or an aficionado or a superstar, but you can tell that story with confidence, no matter that you're just at the beginning or you're somewhere in the middle or you're not entirely sure yet because you haven't received your results, because you're working with us. The GDS-Index benchmark is conducted by a neutral third party, the GDS-Movement, comprising sustainability professionals across the world who are using a constantly evolving methodology that is refined and has buy-in and input from many interested parties. This means that your participation and the results have credibility, which counts hugely in a world where alternative facts are the norm. So let's look at the spectrum of the journey. You may have just joined, you may not have any results yet, but the truth is you can say that you're investing in sustainability towards regeneration already because you've committed to that. When it comes time to renew your annual membership, if you do so, you demonstrate that you're committed to making a difference over a longer period of time and likely a much deeper difference, as I'll show it a little bit later. If you feature in the top 40, which we present to the public, you're amongst the best in the index. Quick aside, important to frame this as in the index, not in the world, because although we welcome every city in the world, we don't yet measure every city on Earth. And when you are benchmarked, you're ranked alongside other participants. So please keep that clear in your titles and in your body copy. And then you'll be a little bit more protected against the accusations of greenwashing that might fly about. And again, we find it's largely done unconsciously. And then the pinnacle of the journey, if you're a GDS award winner, you're a leader in a notable category, and we'll publicize that, and you can too. But there's more, because you might lead in a lesser known category or a region. And we have a fantastic filter option on our Trends Insights page on our website, where you can dig around and you might find that you're in the top 3 of something you didn't realize, like the top 3 participating destinations for EN category, environmental performance, in the Asia Pacific region for larger cities, as these 3 are. There's also improvement ranking to think about. Improvement is one of our core tenets. It drives positive change. So maybe you're not receiving your top scores yet. You haven't hit your goals with the benchmarking that you've set for yourselves for the year or the last few years just yet. If you continue to benchmark, you can also communicate a year-on-year percentage improvement advantage. So here's the top 3. They might not have known they were in the top 3 in this way. And that's based on the filter on the far right, percentage improvement. Pretty cool. Continual participation leads to improvement. We've seen that especially in the average performance of our top 10 cities. That's the light blue line in the graph. So the truth is, even the best can get better if they keep coming back. Does that sound familiar? But this is not only important to those top performers. It's also important because the top performers inspire the greater community, and also because we all need to keep doing better progressively as we are increasingly breaching planetary boundaries in an increasingly unstable and insecure world. So every effort counts. This is a great example of communication from Bordeaux. Here they are making very clear in their website their historical progress on the GDS-Index, and they also count that they are then in the top 5 of the GDS-Index in 2022. So quite specific and a nice example of telling a top story. The second approach is communicating based on your specific performance. You'll find this is quite clear in the criteria that ask for evidence about storytelling, but there may also be evidence in your trove of treasures that don't necessarily explicitly talk about storytelling. So you can find relevant evidence by searching the Omni criteria and answer options for words like communicate, tell, educate, share, train, publicize, publish, inform, etc. And bear in mind, this kind of evidence is usually public-facing, but not always. So maybe you've provided some guides to your supply chain and nobody knows about it, and they really should know about it. Could look good in an RFP. You might need someone's permission to mention their company name if it wasn't originally publicized, and so on. So a good one to check as well. We provide something we nickname a PIR, which is a performance improvement report. We give that out every year to each destination. It's tailored. It's based on that year's performance. We look at strengths, opportunities. We give relevant case studies. We also make recommendations. This is a fantastic place to look for data that you can use to tell the story that's going to increase that trust that you're looking for with your audiences. If the PIR recommendations and its contents not giving you everything that you want in weaving that story, dig a bit deeper. Look into the categories, sets of criteria, or individual criteria that stand alone. See where you've received top marks, full marks, or higher marks than the previous year, or than other categories, or than other criteria, or even other cities. And talk about the projects and the actions that earned you these top results. That's one way of showcasing. Another is to look at specific criteria and see what evidence you have from them that relates to storytelling that you could then extract and use. DM24 is a dedicated marketing and communications criterion. It asks, does the DMO, Tourism and Events website, provide information about the destination's sustainable events and tourism strategy and initiatives? Any of the evidence you've supplied and received points for within this criterion could make a story or part of a story. DM22 is about measurement and reporting, so not overtly communications related per se, because sometimes the reporting is internal. It asks, though, how does the DMO publicly communicate and report on progress towards its sustainability objectives? And there are 3 answer options that can help you unpack a story. There are more examples. We have one in EN6 about climate action. There are 2 answer options that relate. We also have one about the circular economy for hotels in SU2, and it's asking about the promoting. You'll see I highlighted the words that could be clues, but there are more. There's also SU10 and 15, and DM7, 8, and 9. We'll distribute this info in the follow-up email, so you'll be able to unpack it a little bit more in your own time also if you're curious. When you've gathered evidence that you would like to weave into a story, the idea, of course, as has been pointed out, is to think about what are your values, what are your goals, what are your audience's needs, and weave that into a narrative that really takes on a life of its own. It's true that data has authority, especially when it's verified, vetted, validated by an external body like GDS-Index. But as Betsy pointed out, bringing the story alive and especially involving the audience in some way, if you can, or making it relatable, is a vital part of getting that message across. Even if all your data is verified and vetted and validated, you still need to take the story out of the data and deliver it into the heart of your recipients. So you might be a DEI and capacity building superstar. Potentially your powers are in your climate action. You can pick and choose according to the format you're working with, the particular goal project you're on, the audience that you need to gratify and convert. You've got a trove of true tales, and we're here to support you in that storytelling. I wanted to also share a wonderful example of what I think of as multi-category storytelling. This storytelling cuts across a lot of different aspects to tell a really powerful, convincing, compelling story about a place. So Helsinki provides a sustainability guide for its visitors and for its MICE professionals, but Helsinki Partners created a separate campaign that frames it as a DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion leader in its broader region, using first-hand micro-video testimonials. These are frank accounts from locals who come from all over the world, all kinds of places and backgrounds, and they speak about how the city gives them a life that looks like them. There's about, I thought there were about 15 or 18 videos. I didn't exactly count, but there's a beautiful long playlist, and it looks at business, work-life balance, green spaces, security, creativity, a gamut of topics that would be relevant to anyone. And I really was curious about ideally going for a business meeting and having a little mini holiday together. So I make it a pleasure trip. When I watched just 2 of these quick videos, there was an integrity and an authority in these first-hand accounts that rang very true to me. But let's see what you think of one example.
Finland and Helsinki are about balance, same as life. And by definition, balance is something that you look for, but as soon as you find it, you lose it, and then you must find it again. A balance between family and work is part of the culture here, but also a balance between nature and technology. As an example of balance for me, the ultimate balance experience comes from going to a sauna and then swimming on a frozen lake. You pass from hot to cold, from excitement and adrenaline to total relaxation and to feel balance in nature as a human being. The first time it was like, I'm going to die, right? But then after that, after you know that you're not going to die, actually you just feel better and better. And then after the combination of the extremes, you feel like peace.
I wouldn't mind showing me around. So we also provide some marketing material for you. This is a sneak peek of the 2024 material. We'll supply for participants, top 40 members and winners. It's branded. It'll be available after 16 October. And in addition to that, we have a guide in Omni in the toolbox that was put together by our PR guru, Anya Spice. It's called PR and Communications Guide for Destinations, and within it has a press release template. We can publish a press release of yours on our website. You can find various storytelling tips and examples on our blog. And if you're after something more tailored in terms of your communication strategy or rollout, please do reach out to your relationship manager and discuss something more along the lines of what you're looking for. And also, possibly hosting or participating in a storytelling masterclass. And with that all in mind, I wish you good luck in the very exciting journey of ideating your authentic and transparent sustainability story for your destination. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess, for this wonderful presentation and for giving us the macro view of how our destinations can actually leverage on their GDS-Index participation to tell truthful and authentic stories. We are actually running out of time, so we have space for only one question, if there's any. You can also write down the question, and in case we do not have time to answer it throughout the webinar, we'll get back to you. Okay, we have a question for Guy. Guy, would you like to address the question?
Let's have a look what the question is. Guys, non-profits are not within the current legislation. So you would, so if Ottawa Tourism is, for example, set up as a non-profit, then legally it won't touch you. So that's good news, right? I think most DMOs are non-profit or public institutions in Europe. Definitely, it's a mixture of that in the States, but there are some totally private ones that would affect you. So we're in an interesting space because I think most cases the legislation won't touch you, but the soft regulation will. We talk about soft laws and hard laws. So I think there's this kind of group pressure will affect you. And yeah, so that'd be an interesting one to see how that develops. This is developing a lot. As I said, the law's not final, that one, but some of the other laws are. So just watch this space. As I said, we're launching a white paper in the next few weeks. So that'll give you a bit more depth that we could go through today. And we're just going to keep updating that as it becomes clearer. Yeah, cool.
All right, thank you, Guy. And before we wrap up today's session, Betsy, would you like to tell us more about the storytelling and communication strategies for regeneration masterclass?
Well, we've just refreshed the approach and the modules. So sort of made them up to date, tweaked them a bit, and I have big shoes to fill with Mel, whose expertise is slightly different than mine. So if you've done it before, you might want to do it again because it will have a slightly different slant. But we are about to launch the option of if you want to do a takeaway day or to open enrollment, you can come do it. We're thinking Barcelona, but I will probably have more to say about this. We would love to have also maybe a sponsor. We would come to you and you would come away with a story from input from experts from all over the place. So yeah, we can tweak options to suit you, but it's going to be a slightly refreshed approach.
Thank you, Betsy. And while we're searching for a host for our masterclass, we already have found one for the forum. It's going to happen in Bruges in a month, in fact. We hope that many of you have registered. We're actually sold out, and we have now opened the waiting list. So in case you haven't purchased your ticket yet, please go ahead and register in the waiting list for the forum and the Impact Day. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for participating in the webinar today. I hope you found it useful and you feel the inspiration to go ahead and start creating your authentic storytelling narratives. And remember that the stories you create today have the power of inspiring action and change for tomorrow. So thank you very much, everyone, and hope to see you soon.